And it is in that point of rest that you find freedom, justice, and equality. Al-Islam is freedom, justice, and equality. And the people of faith have been struggling and striving to find freedom, justice, and equality. Brothers and sisters, we know through the shared experience that us as African Americans, we were once coming from a place that sold us, that had us in captivity, that had us in genocide, that had us in the struggle to find peace, to find freedom, to find justice, to find equality. And what the Creator does, what God Almighty does in those instances, is that He gives hope. He gives us courage. He gives us faith. Because in those moments of struggle, that vulnerable life at that particular point in time, there's beauty in it. And how do we find beauty in that struggle? We find beauty in that struggle because we understand that God is always in control, and He creates these challenging situations. He creates these challenging circumstances to bring about freedom, justice, and equality, and the struggle for peace. So when those seeds, and what seeds represent is life. The seed represents opportunity. The seed represents possibilities. So when those seeds of those African American souls came over to the shores of America, there was in a barren land. There was unfulfilled. God had a plan. God had a plan in the midst of that struggle. God had a plan in the midst of those extenuating circumstances to bring about the possibilities. And those seeds germinated. Frederick Douglass, Noble Drew Ali, Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Imam W.D. Muhammad. And so those seeds represent possibilities. So all of us as one human family, and this struggle for peace, and this struggle to unite, and this struggle to come back to our true essence. In those possibilities, we all represent coming from that one human soul, coming from that one germ that was clinging to the womb of the mother. And out of that spread the world, countless men and women. And we share in that struggle because it is deeply embedded into our life. It's clocked into our nature. To understand that struggle brings about peace. Struggle brings about freedom, justice, and equality. And I'll close by saying this. The struggle that we see of all of our brothers and sisters all over the world, let us not be in despair, brothers and sisters. Understand that the Creator is in control. Understand that it takes us as one human family to come together, to unite, to strive and to struggle, because we represent the possibility. And from us as this one unit coming together, by us coming together, we bring hope to the next generation. And through that struggle for freedom, justice, and equality, we will unite again under the peace and the serenity that God has us in, when the body and when the whole human family comes together and as one unit, fighting for peace, justice, and equality. And that is the freedom that we all aspire to want and to have. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Imam Hanif, for a message that connects us to history, divine and human, that connects us to our source, that connects us to a message of hope in a time of mass death. My brothers and my sisters, I first met Cornel West as a student, but not face to face. I knew him through his books. I knew him as a theologian, as a philosopher. One reads his CV and one knows that in this country, Dr. West stands amongst the most noted public intellectuals, the most noted public philosophers, the most noted public voices of reason and justice and truth. Whether that was at Harvard University or at Princeton, or now at the Union Theological Seminary in New York, Dr. West's life has been dedicated and committed to teaching, inspiring, questioning, and taking us to those uncomfortable places where our ethics and our morals come up against the real world, and he demands of us that our ethics and morals should never be compromised. Brothers and sisters, I had the opportunity to meet Dr. West in person in 2019 when a group of my students in New Haven organized a gathering called Students for Yemen. It later became a national organization. One of my students, a young, amazing Yemeni undergraduate, lost her grandmother to cholera after the vicious foreign attacks on the Yemeni people backed by American empire. Students reached out to Dr. West and said, Dr. Cornel West, could you come? Dr. West wrote a simple email back and said, I'll be there. We kind of got worried. There was no details about train travel, car rentals, hotels. We didn't even get a bill for an honorarium. And we thought to ourselves, this is one of the most significant public personalities in the United States. Maybe we got something wrong. We didn't do the right thing. We didn't contact the right people. I remember standing in Battelle Chapel at the heart of Yale University when one of my students called me at 6:30, the time we had asked Dr. West to be with us, that Dr. West was in front of the chapel hanging out with the students, speaking with them, talking to them, supporting them. What really moved me that night, I'm sharing this with you because many of us have worked with people who call themselves religious scholars. We've worked with celebrity personalities and all kinds of people, illustrious folk, let's just say. But that night, I witnessed something that has stayed with me and that I honor about Dr. West even before his stand on Palestine and his clarion call and voice of moral clarity in a time of spiritual disintegration. And that was that I saw the way that he was with students. I saw the way that he was with the caretakers at the chapel. I saw how in a few moments he memorized the name of every single student who was an organizer, and he went up on stage. He thanked each of them personally. He remembered part of their story. He honored their contribution. And then when the night was done, and he had taken planes, trains, and automobiles that day to reach New Haven in time, and I know that, he stayed 2-3 hours to speak to each and every person who came, to pray with them, to speak with them, to take a photograph, to share his details. It was a remarkable moment for me because in a way I've come to be cynical about the public figure, about the politician, about the superstar professor and the public intellectual. I'm at that age now. But that night changed me, and it changed my students, who to this day say, wasn't that a remarkable night? That Dr. West walked in at 6:30 and was present with us until the moment he got in his car and went to the hotel that he had booked. There was no follow-up email for our honorarium either, even though we would have been honored to have furnished it. Who you're going to hear from tonight, I believe, is the real deal. And in a political landscape where political morality has collapsed, where our elected officials cannot even speak truth about what they are seeing, They can't even acknowledge what they're seeing. You are a generation, especially our young people, you are the generation who for the first time in human history is watching genocide in real time. I grew up in Bosnia and Rwanda. Those were the things that shaped me and my generation. And we heard about Srebrenica weeks after it's happened. We knew the extent of the Rwandan catastrophe months after it happened. Your generation and all of us are watching this genocide real time. And so we demand of our public officials in real time responses. And the least we ask them to say is to call injustice, injustice, to call mass death, and to call genocide, genocide. And we can't even do that. That's why tonight is so important. That's why people like Dr. West are so important. Because in this country, there is a need, and Dr. West has been speaking about this for years. He speaks about the spiritual depravity. He speaks about the collapse of public morality, public political morality. He speaks with and adjacent to indigenous people. He speaks with and adjacent to marginalized people. And he speaks with and adjacent to those who have been oppressed, because that's the public depravity. The political parties will make us think different things. But tonight we're going to hear from someone who at this moment is one of the voices of moral clarity in this country, who has spoken strongly and rallies across the country. And just a few weeks ago, we saw Dr. West at the rally for Gaza in Washington, D.C., attended by 500,000 people. And I felt the electricity that day, along some of you who might have been there with me. We felt the electricity when he came up on stage, because he voiced what we felt in our hearts. And he voiced what we wanted to say, which was, this is not about Jew and Muslim. This is about humanity. This is about justice. This is about occupation. This is about apartheid. This is about genocide. And when that is happening, we stand on the side of the oppressed. Brothers and sisters, it's an honor for me tonight to ask Dr. Cornel West to join us on stage here at Mariam Islamic Center.
What a blessing to be in this consecrated space. Oh, yes. 18 years of worship, service, sacrifice, tears and laughter, and zeroing in on something greater than each and every one of us. God's self. I am so very, very moved to be in this space, in the mosque. I think of those who have meant so much to me, someone who has been shaped and molded by towering Muslims. I'm thinking, yes, of Muhammad Ali, who means the world to me. I don't exist without Muhammad Ali. Courage, determination. I don't exist without Malcolm X, El-Hajj Malik Shabazz. I don't exist without Naima Coltrane, the Muslim sister, the first wife of the inimitable John Coltrane. So when he plays a Love Supreme, he's not thinking of something abstract. He's thinking of something real, in flesh, in body. Of Naima Ann, his magnificent second wife, Alice Coltrane herself. I happen to be looking at my dear brother Tex to hear Alan. Give it up for this, brothers. Wave, brother, same legacy, same tradition, towering jazz musician. And he's part of a family of artistic nobility, of Debbie Allen, Felicia Rashad. What a grand family in the tradition from which I come. And say, well, Brother West, what do you mean from which you come? Well, you see, I am who I am because somebody loved me and somebody cared for me and somebody attended to me. When I come to Texas, I'm coming home because my beloved mother, Irene B. West, grew up in Orange, Texas. Anybody heard of Orange, Texas? Anybody heard of Orange, Texas, right down the way? And my brother Clifton, older brother, still going strong. He was born in Port Arthur, Texas. Anybody heard of Port Arthur, Texas? Oh, yes. So when I would come to Texas, we would always drive through Houston. Couldn't wait to get back and see Big Daddy, and couldn't wait to see Grandma T. Rose. So we wanted to get to Houston quickly to get to Orange. And so now here, I say Houston, Sugar Lake, I guess they overlap in a number of different ways. But here I return once again, but this time, to be in this consecrated space with my precious Muslim brothers and sisters, and to have this magnificent overlap. Because you see, I come from a great people, a grand tradition of a Black people. For 400 years of chronic hatred bombarding us every day. Once we got off of those barbaric slave ships and taken to the barbaric slave auctions and then moved to barbaric slave plantations, levels of hatred beyond language, and yet every generation we Black folk have dished out love warriors in the face of that kind of hatred, of self-love, of love of neighbor, no matter what color, no matter what country, no matter what religion. That's deep morality and spirituality in a moment of overwhelming barbarity. That's the history of Black people. They terrorized for 400 years and produced freedom fighters who call for liberty for everybody. That's the Frederick Douglasses. That's the Sojourner Truths and the Harriet Tubmans, the Ida B. Wells Barnetts, the A. Philip Randolphs, and we haven't even got to Martin Luther King Jr. yet. In the face of trauma, having to decide whether to be wounded healers or wounded hurters, because all of us in some way will be wounded in our trek from our mama's wombs to tomb. But with all of the wounds and scars and bruises, how will we transfigure that kind of suffering to be wounded healers? That's part of what has gone into me, poured into me, and believe you me, I'm just a little small wave in this great ocean of this tradition. I'll never be the human being that my mother was, Irene B. West, or my father was, Clifton West, or my pastor, Willie P. Cook of Shiloh Baptist Church. I understand that. That's why I always begin with a note of piety. What is piety? The acknowledgement of the sources of good in our lives so that we can give a thanks to a God, thanks to a mama, thanks to a daddy, thanks to grandparents, thanks to friends, something that helps us move in our way as we live our lives. Gratitude, thankfulness. No matter how despairing, grim, and dim the situation is, I got a spirit inside of me that the world didn't give me and the world can't take away. And I learned that in the West household. I learned that in Shiloh Baptist Church on the black side of Sacramento, California. I learned that with the Black Panther Party, with their breakfast programs for the poor and their prison programs that I've been able to teach in for now 41 years. I've been blessed to teach in prisons. But what has that got to do with Gaza? Everything. Because as you can imagine, when that tradition has been poured into a cracked vessel like me, how could I not raise my voice and say anytime any people are being terrorized and traumatized and hated, be it crimes of humanity, war crimes, or crimes of genocide, we must raise our voices. I come from a black people whose anthem is to lift every voice. Every voice. To lift that voice in the name of what? In the name of truth. And the condition of truth is to allow suffering to speak. There is no truth that's not intertwined with forms of suffering so that one is able to work through that suffering and use that pain to generate some love and freedom and joy and healing. And so when people raise a question to me, Brother West, my God, don't you know you can get in trouble? I said, anybody who tells the truth on behalf of poor, oppressed people anywhere in the world will get in deep trouble. So what? The question is to bear witness and be a witness. The question is to make sure you're speaking your truth in such a way that you're touching people's souls and unsettling their minds so that they're straightening their backs up. And anytime, everyday people straighten their backs up, they're going somewhere because folk can't ride your back unless it's bent. And take a stand. Can't be a jazz musician, a blues woman without finding your voice. Thank God that black folk didn't come up with an anthem called Lift Every Echo. Because if you just go echo Fox News and echo CNN and echo MSNBC and echo the corporate media, then you're not going to be able to come near the truth, the suffering, the resilience, the resistance. Where will we gain access to the truth? When people raise their voices. And even given our various traditions, religious, political, and ideological, we've got to have a solidarity in our quest for truth. So that for me, a Palestinian baby has exactly the same value and significance as any other human baby in the world. And that is non-negotiable. I'm talking about an Ethiopian baby. I'm talking about a Texan baby. I'm talking about an Iranian baby. I'm talking about an Iraqi baby. I'm talking about a Brazilian baby. I'm talking about babies across the board. The babies that our dear brother was talking about. Made in the image and likeness of a great God. What does it mean to take that seriously? It means that we are willing to serve, sacrifice, pay a cost, bear a burden in that quest for truth. And you say, I come from the revolutionary Christian tradition of black people. See, that's Fannie Lou Hamer, that's Martin Luther King Jr., and that's a tradition that says you can't talk about unarmed truth connected to suffering unless you also talk about unapologetic love. And justice is what love looks like in public. Yes. Just like tenderness is what love feels like in private. So I say I love my Palestinian brothers and sisters publicly, unapologetically, and will be faithful unto death in that love. How come? Because I love God's children, and I begin with the least of these. I begin with the oppressed and the subjugated and the demeaned and the desecrated and the persecuted. But as a Christian, I try to love everybody. I love my Jewish brothers and sisters. I just hate Israeli occupation and domination and subjugation. This is not about hating a particular group. You're trying to keep track of the morality and the spirituality. You're trying to keep track of being morally consistent. You try to keep track on recognizing that anytime you speak the truth, you better be ready for character assassination, if not literal assassination in the history of this country. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means that I also come from a history of black people, that when we raise our voice at its highest level, you better be ready for the FBI to be on you. When you raise your voice at the highest level, you better believe that it's better to be dead than afraid. And it's better to be a corpse than a coward. And part of our problem these days is that we got so many leaders in high places of all different colors who are afraid and scared and intimidated and will say anything in order to try to win some popularity, as if integrity, honesty, and decency has no status whatsoever. Well, I learned from the black freedom struggle that if you're a coward, if you're going to be complacent, if you're going to be conformist to any form of injustice, then you're never going to be a long distance runner. For Allah, a God following Jesus, or prophetic Judaism or prophetic Buddhism like a bell hooks, or even as a secular brothers and sister who just loves other human beings and believes in the freedom of each and every one of us. We must have a spiritual renaissance in the face of spiritual decay, a moral awakening in the face of immorality, and that means we need more courage. We need more persons to straighten their backs up. Too many folk have been spineless. Too many folk have become well-adjusted to injustice and well-adapted to indifference. And the great Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel used to say, indifference to evil is more insidious than evil itself. So when we look at these politicians that move from 17 to 66, and you say, well, 13,000 precious Palestinian babies have already been murdered, already been killed, more even maimed, some of them in the rubbles. What took you so long? Just calling for ceasefire is not a great breakthrough anyway. In the siege, in the occupation, make sure that Palestinian dignity, make sure that Palestinian equality, make sure that Palestinian humanity is affirmed. You're not going to get no moral prize calling for ceasefire. What took you so long? And everybody knows that those were precious Europeans being subjugated and demeaned with genocidal attacks from Muslims or Arabs. The media coverage would be exactly the opposite. There would be portrayals every moment of the European children, 13,000 European children gone. If there was a Palestinian occupation of precious Jewish brothers and sisters, what do you think Congress would do? What do you think the president would do? It would be the exact opposite. And that tells me something that deeply upsets me and sets me on fire. You trying to tell me that a Palestinian life has less value than a European life? I have no patience for that whatsoever, and never ever will. Never ever will. And it's not because I hate Europeans, but they're made in the same image of the same God. And don't ever think that some of us will be silent in the face of that kind of racism, that kind of hatred, alongside the American empire with its machinations, with its attempts to convince us that somehow they're there based on issues of morality. No. Every empire ain't nothing but a combination of organized greed and institutionalized hatred that has to resist power from below to create democratic possibilities. But in the end, it's still a matter of Wall Street and Pentagon shaping White House and Congress. It's still a matter of the lobbies tied to big money shaping Congress, and hence the complacency, the cowardliness, and the conformity. Let us be honest. Let us try to tell the truth tied to love and justice. That's all we want. That's all we want. And I can tell you this, 42 years ago, when I was able to spend such high quality time with my dear brother Edward Said. Edward Said is one of the greatest public intellectuals of the history of the American empire. And I was blessed to spend time with him every day. He was a distinguished professor at Columbia. His beloved wife, Marion, Lebanese. And we would go to New York Times. Just two or three of us. Brother Noam Chomsky would show up sometimes. He's another truth teller from the Jewish part of town. Oh, I love that brother. Three of us out there protesting. Could you please just use the word occupation in the New York Times rather than disputed territories? They looked at us and said, never. You don't say. Truth crushed the earth will rise again. No lie can live forever. Occupation now used. Can you tell a story about 1948 Nakba and the catastrophe? You've been lying about it all this time. You said you got there and the land was empty. Quit lying. You sound like Puritans in America who said, we got here, there's no people here, just buffaloes and Indians. No, Indians are human beings just like you and just like me. They said the same thing about Palestine. You got there's no people. What do you mean there's no people? How come you're spending so much time pushing out 750,000 of them? What do you mean there's no people? How come you're spending so much time coming up with various ways of colonizing them and dominating them? What do you mean there's no people here unless you view them as less than human? We have no patience for that. So there has been a broadening and a deepening of the discourse since 1982 with Brother Edward Said and Akbar Hamad and a whole wave of folk who were concerned about these issues. And the beautiful thing is that the younger generation, and I'm just looking at some of them right now, the younger generation coming alive with a fire for truth, a fire for justice. Keep that love in your heart, building on the great prophetic tradition of Islam. Keep that love in your heart. Don't let anybody discourage you. Don't let anybody degrade you. Stand tall and say, I want to tell the truth just like those who came before at their best, because one day Palestinian brothers and sisters will be free. One day they will not be occupied. One day they will not be dominated. One day they will not be subjugated. They said that about black people, 244 years of barbaric slavery in this land. What makes you think you're going to ever be free? Watch this love and freedom and courage. Watch this organizing. Watch this solidarity. So it is that another 100 years takes place in Texas. Every 2.5 days, some black man or woman lynched. That strange fruit that the great Billie Holiday sang, and the Jewish brother Maripol wrote those lyrics. You all know strange fruit the southern trees bear. Bodies swaying in the southern breeze. What makes black people think that you can break the back of American apartheid? What makes black people think they can break the back of German Jane Crow? Watch this. Watch God move in such a powerful way that people straighten their backs up and organize and mobilize and bring power and pressure to bear. Now, it's true, we still got Jim Crow Jr. right here in Houston, still segregated, mass incarceration still impacting disproportionately black and brown chocolate folk. We still got organized greed, 1% at the top, owning 90% of the wealth. That's spiritually obscene, because every poor and working person, no matter what color, deserves health care, food, housing, quality education, safe community, distant from impending ecological catastrophe. And let me tell you this, it's a new day in this particular empire that's undergoing such decay and decline. Because the first time now, we are getting a realignment taking place. There's never been this kind of marvelous overlap between black folk and Muslim folk. Now, of course, we've always had Muslims who were black, but now it's becoming more intense. We just have to make sure that it's moral and spiritual. We keep love at the center of it and push back on all forms of hatred and revenge. But it is real. And the powers that be are shaking in their boots. Shaking in their boots. And so I'm going to bring this to a close, because we want to have good time for dialogue and conversation and so forth. But I do want to say that I don't want anybody here in this consecrated space to either be surprised by evil or paralyzed by despair. I want you to always recognize that there's possibility and potential. I want you to recognize we must always be participants, not spectators. Don't get cynical when you see the organized greed and institutionalized hatred running things. Don't get cynical when you look on television and see the precious Palestinians being so viciously attacked. Keep track of the sparkle in their eye. Keep track of them with its victory sign. Keep track of the resilience in their soul. Keep track of their sense of always knowing that as long as there is solidarity here and around the world, some of us will be raising our voices consistently, constantly, lovingly, and saying, in the end, even we will be willing to sacrifice. We will be willing to undergo whatever it takes. And you say, well, Brother West, what does Palestinian freedom look like? Well, see, I'm thoroughly convinced that the two-state solution is dead. It was once a possibility. It was once a possibility. Before you got the settler colonial expansion of the Israeli state with now 700,000 settlers, too many of them engaging in vigilante activity. So when you hear so many of the politicians talking about two-state, if you were serious about a two-state 10 years, 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago, yes, that's simply a mirage. That's a subterfuge. You're not serious about a two-state. That's just a way of reproducing the same situation. Well, what do you mean, Brother West? What are you talking about? Well, we got to raise our voices and listen to our Palestinian brothers and sisters concerned with love and justice. And we got to listen to our Israeli and Jewish brothers and sisters. You all know there's a magnificent moral awakening taking place among young Jewish brothers and sisters. If not now, Jewish voices for peace, building on the rich legacy of Amos and Esther and Isaiah. It's something that we've been marching when we say from the river to the sea. And they say, well, Brother West, and I get this all the time and all these hate mail and threats and things. You calling for the annihilation of Jewish brothers and sisters. Don't get it twisted. I don't want genocide of anybody. I don't want annihilation of anybody. It is now, in many ways, from the river to the sea with an apartheid regime, with ethnic cleansing taking place and genocidal assault. That's the option at work at the moment. What is the other option? One state, two nations, like Switzerland. Jewish brothers and sisters, Palestinian brothers and sisters, learning how to live enough together that you will ensure Palestinian dignity and equality with equal access to law and resources, as well as ensure Jewish safety and security. Or the third one is a secular state, where it's just equal rights across the board. Those are the three major options right now. Don't get sucked into this talk about two-state solution. That's long gone. And very few people want to be honest about that. So many of these politicians talk about ceasefire. The first thing they do right after they call about ceasefire is what? But of course, I'm for a two-state solution. I'm for a two-state solution. And we have to be convinced there will never be a situation again in which precious Palestinian brothers and sisters are in a situation where they are dominated with Israeli power, no matter what language they use. There's got to be equality across the board, dignity across the board, safety across the board, security across the board. And we're doing it in the name of Allah, the name of God, in the name of the prophetic legacy of Jerusalem, of Judaism and Christianity and Islam. And for our secular brothers and sisters, it's in the name of democracy, in the most substantive sense in which people lift their voices to shape their destinies so that their dignity will be affirmed. You say, Brother West, you must be one of those old, outdated dreamers. And I smile. And I say, yes, I'm very old school. I come from the prophetic legacy of Jerusalem. That's who I am. That's what I will be. And I will be faithful unto death with the solidarity around the world. It can be Africa vis-a-vis AFRICOM. It could be workers in Brazil. It could be subjugated folk in Russia or China, Muslims in China, anybody. God bless you. The language of Malcolm X, that's catching hell. I'm in solidarity with them, and I intend to be faithful unto death. Thank you all so very much. Stay strong in what you're doing. You got a mighty, mighty work here going on in Houston. Mighty, mighty work in Houston. Oh, yes, indeed. When we used to drive by, I didn't see too many Muslims. Now I see these beautiful Muslim faces all around Houston. Something is going on in Houston. Let's keep this great movement going.
Dr. West, I saw so many of our beloved faces of the sisters and brothers and siblings who are here tonight as you were speaking. So many of us are in tears, really. Because I think for many of us and many of those in the room who have been out at the protests and who have been doing the work of solidarity, that they are hearing so little from our public figures and our political leaders and anyone who is willing to speak truth to power in the way that you have tonight. But Dr. West, I want to get one thing off the table.
Sure.
Because I'm sure you're being confronted with it night after night as you're traveling through the country on this presidential campaign. And clearly, United States law doesn't make it easy for the independent voice to run for public office. And I'm sure many will say there, we love you, Dr. West. We hear the message. But is a vote for truth and justice a vote wasted in a country that is so mired in a two-party dinosaur system? And I think, Dr. West, it's important to confront this point.
Absolutely.
Because I think you are calling us to a movement, and I think that's one of the questions that's on the table.
Absolutely. I mean, we see escalating fascism all around the world. There's no doubt about that. And at this particular moment in the American empire, we have a choice between a bona fide gangster. That's what it is. I'm not name calling. I got overwhelming evidence to make my case. Who's neo-fascist, who's tied to big money, tied to big military, scapegoats the most vulnerable, be they at the border, be they black folk, be they Muslims across the board, and is leading the country toward a second civil war, and sometimes even brags about it. And then we've got another president who enables genocide, who talks about redeeming the soul of the nation. That was the motto of Martin Luther King Jr.'s organization in 1957, to redeem the soul of the nation. And the Democratic Party has the audacity to use Brother Martin's motto to talk about redeeming the soul of the nation, as he is the architect of the mass incarceration regime, which for me is a crime against humanity already. Bails out Wall Street rather than homeowners and everyday people as vice president under Obama. Right? And then at the same time now acts as if an actual genocide taking place before our eyes is something that we are not seeing, and we ought to be preoccupied with his electoral political calculation. See, I don't believe that genocide is ever a site to engage in political calculation. It's a moral issue, it's a spiritual issue, whether you're running for president, whether you're running for dog catcher, whether for any office, you raise your voice based on the morality and the spirituality of it. You don't go into communities trying to act as if you're some kind of Machiavellian figure to engage in calculation of interest group. No. Black people had that under Jim Crow. And how did we break the back of Jim Crow? Mass movements, demonstrations. That's how we broke the back of it. If we had waited for the little narrow interest group calculation of the Southern politicians in Texas, Mississippi, and other places, let alone the North, we'd still be Jim Crow Senior. We raised our backs and we fought. That's why for me, no matter where I am, what I'm running for, books I'm writing, anybody gives me a call from Yemen or wherever it is, I'm there. How come? Because I just want to be a decent person with some integrity and honesty before I go. That's a moral issue. That's a spiritual issue. It has political consequences, but it's not first and foremost political. It's not first and foremost partisan. So when people raise that issue, oh, well, you know, based on the Machiavellian electoral politics, you're going to help Trump. No, a vote for Trump is a vote for Trump. A vote for Biden is a vote for Biden. A vote for anybody else is a vote for anybody else. No politician owns anybody's votes. You raise your voice and you express it. And you see, I'm in a mosque right now, so I'm not going to say a mumbling word about my particular campaign. And you know why? It's precisely because I respect this sacred space too much. This is where you worship. This is where you open up your heart to the power of an almighty God. This ain't no place for political calculation at all. When you talk about the issue, talk about it in moral and spiritual terms. We can meet somewhere else later on and we can become political and partisan if we want, but not in a mosque. I don't do that in my own black church. You're not talking about God and Jesus, something is wrong. But if you talk about the implications of what it means to worship Allah and to still have a resilience in the face of oppression, that makes all the sense in the world. And that for me is what's so very important.
Thank you. Dr. West, you invoked tonight as you began kind of a pantheon of incredible personalities from your tradition.
Yes, yes.
You invoked Dr. King, and you invoked Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker. You invoked Muhammad Ali. And as we said earlier on, as we were introducing tonight's program, February for African American communities and at the intersection with Muslim communities is often so important because it's the month that we bring to mind the legacy of Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, Malcolm X,
Yes, yes.
who was gunned down and martyred in 1965. And you know, growing up, in my own community in Toronto, we would celebrate Brother Malcolm and we would celebrate his legacy. But now that I think back on it, you know, we often didn't use the word martyrdom in relation to, we talked about his assassination. But as I've grown older and recognized that Brother Malcolm is not only a martyr, but the place that he holds in the hearts of all people who value truth, justice, freedom, mercy, and peace, is that his enduring legacy as someone who was gunned down in the line of doing what you have asked us to do tonight, to speak truth to power and to speak morally and courageously. I know yet you come from a great Black Christian theological tradition. And so I want to ask you, what does Brother Malcolm mean to you?
Wow, wow. I wish I could sing. I'd sing a song. I wish I could play piano, a trumpet, or a saxophone. I would play John Coltrane's After the Rain and A Love Supreme. Words are inadequate. Sentences fall short to describe that level of love, courage, service, and sacrifice. And you know, the word witness and martyr come from the same word. So a martyr is someone who bears witnesses and willing to pay the ultimate cost. No doubt about that. I do want to recognize your father, though, brother. Where's your beloved father? Wave his hand. There he is. Give it up for this brother. Come from Canada. I thought about that in Canadian. It's a father's are very, very special. Well, I miss my father so, but I'm so glad to see him. But for somebody like Malcolm X, though, you don't want to make him into a deity or a god. He's a human being like everybody else. And he went through his stages. I used to have these long debates with some of my beloved Black Muslim brothers and sisters. They used to tell me, Brother West, don't you recognize that white folk are the devil? I say, well, I wouldn't go that far now. I said, many of them may enact devilish behavior, but that's true for anybody of any color, any nation. They're not devils. You're just keeping track of their devilish behavior. Well, what was distinctive about Malcolm was what? He was always growing. He was always developing. He was always maturing. And so when he got to Mecca and he looked at all of these beautiful faces of all colors and said, my God, all of these races in America, they don't represent all the white folk. And some of we Christians say, we were trying to tell you that, Malcolm. We're trying to tell you, brother. You got some white brothers and sisters who are on fire for love and justice. And they all around the world. Many of them are Muslims. Many of them are Christians. Some of them are Judaic Jews. Some of them are secular and so forth. But that didn't stop Malcolm, because what was distinctive about Malcolm was he was so honest all the time. He said what he meant, and he meant what he said. He wasn't posing and posturing. He didn't laugh when it ain't funny and scratch when it don't itch and put on a mask and act like he's somebody that he wasn't. He's like the great jazz musicians, the Charlie Parkers and the Mary Lou Williams. When they sit down to play, you're going to get the real thing. They going to empty themselves. Malcolm was like that. He spoke what was inside the inner chambers of his soul. It's the opposite of most spokesmen and leaders these days who will say almost anything. and then pull back when it's time to act, or contradict themselves because there's no deep commitment to consistency. They just posing and posturing. That's what I've always loved about Malcolm. And in many ways that Malcolm was even freer, I would argue, than my dear brother Martin Luther King Jr. Because he was saying things on television that Martin might say in the barbershop, but he wouldn't say on television. Because even he was not as open and candid and honest to the public the way Malcolm was. And I love that about Malcolm. That makes Malcolm in some ways a kind of jazz man. Because if you in jazz, am I right, Brother Tex? If you're not opening your soul, if you're not emptying what's inside of you, put your horn down and go on and become a plumber or something. You know, I mean, there's too many folk who want to express what's deeply inside the way Brother Tex does. You're telling me about your albums in Lebanon and other places. Open it up. And we have rich traditions of that. Yusuf Lateef, the whole rich tradition of the Olatunji and others who make different kinds of choices in terms of their religious sensibilities. But you can imagine, we could go on and on about Malcolm X and the El Hajj Malik Shabazz. Oh, salute you, my brother. Salute you, my brother. Indeed, indeed. God bless you. God bless you.
In a moment, what we'll do is we'll just take about sort of 5 or 6 comments from the brothers and sisters here, and just ask you to respond, and then we'll close it out, and there'll be a time for community and fellowship. So I want to make sure that we get, as Dr. West said, there's nothing more boring than a Q&A. We all like conversations.
Yes.
Questions,
yes.
Comments, concerns, what's on our heart, what's coming out. And I can only imagine what all of us are feeling right now, having heard Imam Hanif and then Dr. West, that there's probably a lot happening in our souls. But I just want to open up the floor, and I just ask that folks keep their interventions short, sharp, and pithy, so we can take about 5 or 6 of them and then ask Dr. West to respond as he will, and it's an opportunity to listen and to engage. So I see one hand there. Do I see a hand over here? Just put it up nice and high. I see 1, 2, 3 from our sisters, 4, 5, and one more. We'll take 3 and 3. Okay. Brother, we'll go to you first, then over there, then there, and then we're going to come across. Sisters, just go ahead, my brother. Please say nice and loud and keep it tight.
Thank you, my brother.
So my question is very simple. We have in this moment where we are experiencing this, all of these rallies and all of.
Do we have a microphone for the brother?
No, it's all right. There you go. Come on, no, don't throw it. No. Take it. You sit how would you?
I got a booming voice.
Yeah.
I got it.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
In this moment where we are seeing this activism about Palestine on the national scale and all of that, I don't know if it is my observation or other brothers have also observed, we are not seeing the participation of African American community in all of these protests. Have you seen that, or what's the reason for that?
Ooh, wonderful question, my dear brother.
Pass it back to the brother there. Right there, that brother right there. We'll take all the questions at once, and then I'll ask Brother West to respond.
Oh, okay. Would you remind me of the question?
I will
if
remind you,
forget?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Do we have a question about these?
On all questions at once, or?
Yeah, and we're going to take all the questions at the same time. Go ahead.
Okay, my question is kind of a piggyback off of the previous question. First, thank you for coming. We really appreciate you coming, and we're honored by your presence. So my question is, just recently there were 1,000 pastors or ministers who wrote a letter to Biden calling for a ceasefire, but a lot of young folks in their congregations are thinking about abandoning Biden, while the leadership in the Black church is still sticking with the Democratic Party. What is the plan to get African Americans in specific to abandon this two-party system and to go third party?
Thank you, brother.
Thank you so much.
There's a brother just over there.
Dr. West, for being here. It is an honor, as has been said.
Just go loud, my brother.
We have conversations now about other aspects. Question to you is how
God bless
do
you.
you
God
have
bless you.
the conversations with people who call it disputed territories? How do you engage in a loving way, but in a meaningful way with others, so that we could do the same in other members of our community? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed. That's wonderful questions. Wonderful questions. You got all of them in your head. That's beautiful.
All right, thank you so much for joining us. I've worked within the Democratic Party system for years, almost a decade, and it's hard and it's difficult. And of the Palestinian from America, it's not going to come for some enlightenment from Israel. It's going to come from the courage we see in the global South. It's going to come from the people we see in South Africa and other places who are also struggling. I'm sorry, it's just so hard when we see this. And it's not a question, but it's really just like, I just don't think America is going to be the liberators. I don't think we can look to them to be that. But what can we do in our capacity to help others come and help liberate not only Palestine, but all of the other places that are also in oppression?
Thank you very much. We'll take that comment from the sister, and then we'll come back to
Absolutely.
Dr. West.
Hello, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. My question is actually, I know you didn't want to talk about politics or anything, but I'm just concerned for all of us Texans when we get to the polling booth and we don't have that write-in option. How are we going to, we're going to abandon Biden, we're not going to vote for Trump. How do we write in another candidate when in the state of Texas, unless, we honestly can't? So how do we do that? What do we do when we get to the polling booth? So that's my question.
Thank you, everybody. So if we have time, we'll try to take another round because I know there's others. So Dr. West, there was these two very poignant questions about what's happening in African American communities and what's happening with African American religious leadership, and that's something you're deeply connected to. How do you kind of parse that out and understand that?
Yeah, and I appreciate that question, all of the questions, but starting with black pastors and black ministers. You see that when Martin Luther King Jr. called for the strike in Montgomery in 1955, he got 17 churches out of 96. So we should never think that the Black Freedom Movement, we should never think that black churches were either monolithic or homogeneous, or the vast majority went that way. Many of them were afraid and scared. They didn't want to get lynched. Many of them were paid off by money from the outside. So when Rosa Parks sat down in order to stand up for justice, and here's Martin King, 26 years old, he's calling for a strike across the board, 381 days. Initially at 17, then when they start to look like they get momentum, you get to 66. Just like these cowardly politicians in Washington. Right? Then it looks like you're going to win. You jump on the bandwagon and say you were there all the time. That's what Nelson Mandela used to say. You said what we would call for was impossible, and when we did it, you said it was inevitable. And then you got in on it. No, we struggled across the board. So it's always that critical minority. Now, Stephen Green and a whole host of others had that magnificent gathering in the United Nations. That was by black ministers and pastors. Very little corporate coverage of it, because they don't want to see black and Palestinians and Muslims coming together like that. You see, right now there's a peace pilgrimage that's going to be beginning next week of all black ministers. All black men are going to march from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C. Let's hope we get the coverage. Let's hope we get the coverage. I was just with National Baptist, all 4 denominations. I was just with COGIC, Church of God in Christ. There's a prophetic slice there. And then there are the majority who are well adjusted to injustice. They scared. You see, they don't want to accent the prophetic possibilities of the faith. They're trying to fit in. That's human, but it's inexcusable. So that when the brother talked about those 1,000 that the New York Times talked about the other day for the first time, you see, that's just spilling over. Now, some of it is generational too. And that's true for young Jews, young black folk, young white folk, young Muslims and Arabs, a younger generation. They look at the old folk and say, oh, we love you to death, but we've got some fire that you know not of. And we're not going to dampen that fire. And I just hope and pray that they learn from the older generation. They always got something to learn from we old folk now. Because we've been through some hell and high water too. And you just make sure you talk about love and justice and not hatred and revenge. That's the great legacies of Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. At their best, that's the moral and spiritual thing. Now, brother, your memory is so magnificent. What was next?
So there's this really important question the gentleman asked about. What's the way that you talk to the naysayers?
Oh,
and we're
yes.
not talking about the politicians. We're talking about neighbors and others, inundated, of course, with the propaganda that's rife around us, the misinformation and the disinformation, actually. What kind of strategies do you use to talk to kind of get through that and to the core of what you spoke about tonight?
Yes. Well, the first thing is anytime you're involved in a conversation with other people, you want to try to keep in contact with their humanity. So you don't just come in putting them down. They're going to shut down in a second. You ask them, how's your mama doing? Fine. You concerned about her? Absolutely. Just like I'm concerned about Palestinian children, I'm concerned about your mama. Now, are you concerned about the Palestinians? Are you concerned about my mama? Yeah. Oh, no, I wasn't asking you just directly. You see that's the brilliant young folk, they following every word. I love that. But the second thing is, then you say, do you think that you might be lied to? Do you think that any news has ever lied to you? Sure. Then maybe they lying about what happened in 1948. Maybe they lying about what 1967 is all about. What's 1948? Well, I'll tell you what, I'll send you Norman Finkelstein's book on Gaza, or I'll send you Brother Rashid Ghaladi's book from Professor of Edward Said at Columbia. Here's the 100-Year War against the Palestinians. I'm going to send you some text. You still into reading, right? You believe in reading? Yeah. Oh, yeah, I like to read all the time. I'm going to bring the book to your house. Read the 100-Year War against Palestinians and tell me what you think. We're going to have a dialogue after that. It opens people up. And you take enough patience to acknowledge that they can grow and mature and develop. And why is that? Because all of us in earlier moments of our own lives were lied to too. And we had to grow. We had to read. We had to listen to perspectives. And we continue to do that because all of us still are finite. Nobody has a monopoly on truth. We all fall short. We're human beings. And so in that sense, there's a certain humility that goes with the tenacity and trying to open up to people. And that's one of the reasons why I spend time with so many different peoples across the board, be it TV, radio, people who deeply disagree with me, go at me tooth and nail. I believe in dialogue. I believe in taking my stand. This is my argument. These are my evidences. And this is the stories that I'm trying to defend and so on, you see. Very much so.
The change that's going to come, is it going to come
Oh,
from
yeah.
within the empire, master's tools, master's house, or is that movement for change going to come from elsewhere, and what role are we going to play in it?
Yeah, that was a very, very powerful point my dear sister raised, really. I think that each struggle is different. I know in South Africa, we did the same thing in terms of the apartheid and the boycotts and so forth. When we met Mandela and talked with him and prayed with him and so forth, he was the first to say that on the one hand, oppressed people will free themselves, but they will have solidarity connections with people all around the world. The global South, where most of the people in the globe are, they're going to play a fundamental role. We can play a role in the American empire. We will not be the liberating role. We will play a crucial role. And we will be in solidarity, raising our voices, bringing power to pressure to bear, because it's true, there is a special relationship between the vicious Israeli occupation and now ethnic cleansing and genocide with our tax dollars. So we have something to bring to bear on that. But no, in the end, oppressed people free themselves as they then are supported by voices in Africa and Asia and Europe, as well as the American empire. The sad thing is that because the American empire itself is in such decay and decline, you see, and it's very profound. You look in the souls of our young people and already see the scars. You see, it's deep in terms of the wealth inequality. It's deep in terms of the mass incarceration. It's deep in terms of the trigger-happy police, and it's deep in terms of the inability of more and more people to even have empathy toward vulnerable people. See, that's a spiritual crisis that's moving toward spiritual death, but it's not it's not so ubiquitous that it's covered all of us, but it is growing. And that's what fascism is. Fascism says, we don't care about anything but our family and people who look like us, and let the tyrant take over and terrorize against all of those others. And that's very much what we're dealing with when it comes to the escalating fascism. But the other thing I want to keep in mind, my dear sister, I hope you agree with me, is that, the God that we worship, we don't understand God's ways. And that means that history is unpredictable. It's unfinished, it's incomplete in any particular historical moment. And so we have to be humble enough to be open enough to look at all the different possibilities. I tell you very honestly, I wish that my Arab brothers and sisters who were running the Arab countries had the depths of solidarity with Palestinians that many folk in the United States do. Oh, they can make a big difference. Sure, they could cut off oil. They could do all kinds of things. You're not getting a drop of oil until you quit killing these Palestinian children. Boom. In the name of Allah. They could do that. So in a way, it's a litmus test for everybody. Who really cares? Who's really concerned? Who's really willing to pay a price to bring power and pressure to bear? So that could be an unpredictable thing. We could reach the point, especially as the regional war escalates, where it moves in that direction. Things are that changeable and provisional. What was that other one talking about?
And we ended with a kind of a practical question.
Yes.
About the
right.
political landscape in Texas. I was going to say that we have one of the team here, Mr. Madeline, and I wonder if you could say a word about that, and that you have the microphone right next to you. If you could say a word. By the way, we've been working with an incredible campaign team that Dr. West has. We've all worked with political campaigns before. I don't think I've ever worked with a political campaign where the campaign managers aren't just amazingly adept and experienced, but their heart and soul is not only in the candidate, but in what that candidate represents. And so I want to recognize you, and I want to recognize Anthony, and I want to recognize the amazing people who
No,
made
I
today
appreciate
possible.
that. Appreciate that, though, brother. You're absolutely right.
Well, we have a challenge in Texas. And in order for Dr. West to be on the ballot, we need to collect 115,000 signatures between March 3rd and May 13th. Now, I think we can do it.
Inshallah.
And we're going to need to do it with a combination of volunteers and paid canvassers. So it's a big mission. And, you know, we're calculating it would likely cost $1 million to get us on the ballot in Texas, just because of the short time frame and the scale. So we really want to commit those resources. And we also need help from strong partners in Texas to make sure that he's on the ballot here.
Thank you so much.
That's true.
Thank you.
That's true. And it's amazing. The 3 states that's most difficult to get on: Texas, New York, California. See, that's how the two-party reproduces itself.
Dr. West, as we come to the close of our time together tonight, go ahead, Uncle.
Yeah,
I can't say no to Uncle.
Absolutely. Oh, dear brother, you speak right in the microphone, my brother.
Peace be with you. I just want to say something to the brother about the African Americans supporting Palestine. In the African American struggle, the leaders have always supported Palestine. Malcolm X, before he died, gave a speech. You can get it on YouTube about supporting Palestine. Kwame Nkrumah, Stokely Carmichael,
That's right.
supported Palestine. They ran them out of the country. I mean, the Black Panther Party.
That's right.
Platform supported Palestine.
Absolutely.
African people were always supported Palestine and oppressed people throughout the world. Always.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. He's speaking the truth. He's speaking the truth. I mean, the challenge has always been, my dear brother, they set those high standards, and so many of the black preachers don't reach those standards. You know what I mean? But they set the standards, and those standards will always be those that we look to. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. No, I appreciate that, brother.
Dr. West, as we begin to close, and there'll be an opportunity for conversation, community, as we go into the night. Dr. West is remarkably generous that way. And before I ask Imam Hanif to join us again for closing prayer with you, Dr. West,
Absolutely.
One final reflection from you, at least for tonight. You've been traveling across the country. You've been city to city, state to state, county to county. You've been speaking in churches and places of worship, on campuses. You've been engaging with naysayers. You've been talking to supporters. You've been building this movement, a movement that's already been going, and you're bolstering it. You're adding people to it. Has there been something that's happened, an incident, a story, an interaction you've had in the last few weeks that you could share with us that kind of is the stuff that continues to inspire you and light your fire? Because I know you, even tonight as you were speaking, you're fed by community, by engagement and being with people. I don't think you could do what you do if you didn't love people. And you've talked about love tonight. Is there something that's happened maybe in the past few weeks that you can share with us that is a fire to that, and kind of give us some fire as well?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. I see why you teach at Yale University, brother. Give it up for this Yale professor. Yale professor, distinguished professor. So brilliant and a heart of gold. You know, when I started this morning, this is my 6th event today. And oh yes, we had 5 wonderful events at the Shrine of the Black Madonna, Great Albert Cleage, Abibe. And when I went to Taste, there's a restaurant called Taste. Anybody know that restaurant? I went to Taste and I ran into Mama PK. who was the son of the great Reverend Henry McCary. And I ran into Mama, Sister Sonia. They were there having a little biscuit. And we talked. And before long, here comes Bunchy from the Black Panther Party and Yusuf from the Black Panther Party. And we had other Garveyites, all of us together for over 7 hours today before I was blessed to be in this consecrated place. How could I not be uplifted? How could I not be elevated? These are sisters and brothers who have been at it for decade after decade after decade, just like my brother who just spoke. I could feel it in his spirit. I could feel it in his determination. I could feel it in his fire. I could feel it in his love. There's a connection there. Same is true when I walked in here and saw all of these smiles. Folk I'd never met before. And we hugged. And what does that mean? That means that occupation, domination, hatred, greed will never have the last word as long as there's breath in our bodies. That's good news. That's very good news. We send that to Gaza. Let our brothers and sisters know in Gaza that there's folk right in the belly of the American empire who say we will never allow genocide to have the last word. Crucial. Oh, yes. That's good news for me. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Before I ask Brother Hanif, Imam Hanif, to take us home with a closing prayer, and Dr. West is a man of prayer, and we are people of prayer. And to close with prayer is so vital. I just want, again, to recognize and to thank Dr. West for what has been a remarkable, uplifting, powerful, spiritual, and clarifying evening. Thank you, Dr. West. Thank you. I know we'll all get up after the prayer and we'll want to greet and meet each other. So I want to say a great thank you to Dr. West's campaign team. There's a QR code. If we want to get that 115,000 signatures so that Texas can make its voice heard in this way, then you know the people to talk to. Madeline is here, Anthony is here, campaign staff are here. You can sign up and get connected immediately to the work and to the movement that is going on, and to amplify the message of this campaign and those who speak with that message. I want to recognize the Maryam Islamic Center, my brother Abdullah Omar, and the mosque community for the generous way that they have welcomed this program, allowed everyone to be here, opened its doors to the wider community. Thank you to the masjid. And thank you to each and every one of you who has come tonight. And last but certainly not least, I really need to thank my friends, my beloved sisters and brothers from the Risala Foundation. They deserve not only applause, but our support. I hope all of you read the incredible piece in the Houston Chronicle that was published yesterday on the work of Risala, which featured the voices of folks like Rehan and Zain and Abdullah Omar and many others. And Hinha, mashallah. These are incredible individuals, and we would not be here tonight without Rehan, Zain, Hinna, and the rest of the team really facilitating the space and opening up community space. Every community needs a Risala, and Houston should be incredibly proud that you have this incredible group of your friends, your activists here. Jazakallah khairan. Brother Hanif, I'm going to hand to you to close us, take us home with dua and prayer on what has been an incredible night. And thank you. Thank you for the words that began tonight that really opened up our hearts and made us ready for to recommit ourselves to the work of truth and justice and mercy and what Allah wants from us. Bismillah.
Ameen. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
We ask that Allah, highly glorified is He, the creator and sustainer of all the worlds, the guardian and evolver, to remove the suffering, the pain, the agony, the hopelessness from the hearts and the souls of our whole human family. We ask that Allah extend His highest choice of blessings on all of the prophets, starting with Adam alayhi salam and concluding with Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. We ask that Allah unite the hearts of all of the believers, the Muslims, the Jews, and the Christians, united in faith, in dignity, integrity, courage, faith, and persistence, so that we can be the beacon of light that will be the hope of all of the world. We ask that Allah bring patience. We ask that Allah bring love and mercy and compassion amongst all of us, remove the sickening, the challenging and difficult circumstances that face all people all over the world. We ask that Allah bless Brother Cornel West and his campaign, and we ask that you give him the resources available for him to be successful. We ask that you have mercy and you extend your blessings upon his travels throughout the world and his campaign to be successful. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. Our Lord, give us the good and most excellent in this life, the good and most excellent in the next life, and save us from the chastisement of the fire, led by our own desires. Amen. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum.
Brothers and sisters, continue to organize, continue to mobilize, continue to protest, continue to spread the word. Free Palestine. Jazakallah khairan.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for everything.
Tomorrow there will be a mobilization at 1 p.m. at West Hammer and Posto. The brothers and sisters are here who are organizing tomorrow's protest. Please join.